Thanks for joining me. Welcome to another week here on the Kenny Report, the first week on News24. Tonight, Labor tries a switch to fool voters in Victoria. Surely nobody will fall for that one. Federal Labor again gives succor to the terrorists of Hamas and demonises Israel. I'll talk to former Federal Labor MP Michael Danby. Higher taxes, higher interest rates and, surprise, surprise, real estate sales are plummeting. I'll get the latest from the coalface. I'll also check in on the Commonwealth Games and the anti-immigration protests in Glasgow with Sophie Ellsworth, and with Gemma and Caroline we'll discuss the Prime Minister's secrecy over dinner with the son of a billionaire. Let's get into it. Political turmoil is unfolding in Melbourne as we speak, with Labor Premier Jacinta Allan's leadership going through its death throes. I'll have plenty of analysis of the political and factional details of all of this tonight, but I want to start off with a different point, a more important point, and that is that these Labor politicians are treating voters like fools. They're playing voters for mugs. Nothing they do is going to do anything positive for Victorians, for the government or for their future. It's all about trying to fool more voters into sticking with Labor in the hope that they can keep as many seats as possible in Parliament after November's election. In opposition, presumably, because surely they can't be deluded enough to think that they'd be returned in government. Just have a look at what this mob has done. Under Daniel Andrews, Labor ruled in Victoria with seemingly unfettered power for almost a decade. Chairman Dan didn't just send the state broke, chalk up mountainous debt, do dodgy deals with China and pay hundreds of millions of dollars not to build a tunnel and hundreds of millions of dollars more not to host the Commonwealth Games. But he also locked down Melbourne more than any city in the world during COVID, locked some people in their tower blocks and subjected millions of people to unnecessary, unscientific curfews. And when all of this started to catch up with Labor, he resigned. And Labor thought it could skate through under a new face, Jacinta Allan. With the opposition in a shambles, it worked for a while, but now, with the election looming, Labor again realises it's on the nose and, hey presto, instead of governing better or taking what's coming, Labor looks for the old switcheroo. If they knife Allan and install her deputy Ben Carroll, they'll be hoping for a lift in the polls, a honeymoon effect. They'll pretend they could stay in government and they'll try to con more voters into sticking with them. Don't fall for it. It's the same unions, the same factions, the same power brokers calling the shots. It's the same policies, the same wrong priorities, the same crime wave, the same potholes and the same ideology holding sway. They are taking voters for fools, making a superficial change in a desperate bid for votes. I don't think it'll work. Voters tend to be a little smarter than that. Just 8 months after the horrific murders at Bondi, the worst terror attack on Australian soil, when 15 innocent people were slaughtered and dozens of others seriously injured in what police allege was an Islamic State-inspired atrocity directed at a Jewish Australian Hanukkah celebration. Well, just 8 months after that, the Australian Labor Party, the party that governs nationally and in New South Wales, made changes to its national platform that provide succor to the Islamist extremists of Hamas, that demonise Israel, and therefore these changes fan the flames of anti-Semitism in this country. Now, the Prime Minister and the Labor Party are trying to argue they did a good job because the ALP position is not as bad as it could have been. You know, they play word games by saying that, sure, while they didn't call for Hamas to be disarmed, they did condemn terrorism more broadly. And they rejected a bid by Sydney MP Ed Husic, who has no special connection to this issue except that he's Muslim. Well, Husic wanted an amendment that would have falsely accused Israel of genocide and war crimes and imposed trade and diplomatic sanctions. And the Labor power brokers rightly blocked this move. But really, they called that a win? Labor stopped short of endorsing hateful lies against Israel, and they deserve credit for that restraint?
Look, what I say is that the party platform has got the balance right.
Got the balance right? Anthony Albanese thinks the right balance is resisting a push to slur Israel with false claims of war crimes and genocide, and at the same time failing to demand that the Islamist terrorists of Hamas lay down their arms. That's not balance. It's foreign policy that fails to stand up for Australian values, for humanitarian norms, and for our democratic and rules-based ally in Israel. And you don't have to take my word for what Labor has demonstrated here. Have a look at what former Army Colonel and former Federal Labor MP and Junior Defence Minister Mike Kelly has written in The Australian. He sums it up like this: emerging from last week's ALP National Conference, it is impossible to escape the conclusion that there are troubling sections within the broader Labor movement intent on fanning extreme views on Israel and the Middle East conflict. They are not worthy of the Labor Party, certainly not worthy of a party in government. Those words are from a senior Labor figure. And Kelly is worried about the position Labor adopted, saying, equally concerning, the amendments adopt a demonstrably false narrative that Israel has failed in its obligations on relief and medical support while ignoring Hamas's documented obstruction of aid. And Kelly also makes a telling observation about where all of this inevitably leads. The amended platform's disproportionate focus on Israel and Palestine at the expense of other global conflicts reveals an obsession explicable only as anti-Semitism and serving other malign interests. Yeah, Mike Kelly is no right-wing warrior. He's a Labor man through and through, a former frontbencher. This is deeply worrying stuff. He's just dead right on this stuff. It's just more evidence that Labor is culpable for the failing social cohesion in this country, that it has contributed to the demonisation of Israel, rewarded terrorism in the Middle East with its diplomacy, and failed to adequately combat Islamist extremism and anti-Semitism at home here in Australia. Events in Berlin on the weekend, when an alleged terrorist drove his car into a gay pride march, remind us of the threat we face.
Police have now killed the suspect who allegedly drove a car through a pride parade yesterday in Berlin in what authorities say was an Islamic terror attack. 21-year-old Abdul Balut is accused of killing at least one and injuring 29 others. Authorities say he has Lebanese roots and is allegedly tied to the country's, quote, Islamist scene.
Yeah, the German police got their man, but only after death and mayhem ensued, and reportedly the suspect had been arrested and charged previously on terror-related charges, then freed because he promised to leave his Islamist extremist days behind. This is such reckless negligence by authorities. But who among us is surprised? Yeah, terrorists, as we know, they don't need guns or bombs. They're happy to use knives. In Israel in recent days, they've used matches or cigarette lighters, starting bushfires. And of course, they've used cars and trucks many times before. That's why across Sydney's eastern suburbs now you see cement and water-filled plastic barriers. Most of the country doesn't see these. Most people in Sydney don't see them. But outside synagogues and Jewish schools where Australian families go to school or go to worship, they do so behind these barriers in case terrorists in cars or trucks try to take them out. Yeah, that's how some Australians live right now. Armed guards and cement barriers at schools. Only Jewish Australians have to live like that now. But all Australians need to understand that this battle, this struggle against evil, is one for all of us. Why? Well, there are two reasons, of course. First, because we should never stand by while any group of Australians is threatened and attacked in this way. But second, the terrorists will come for everyone else too. They have done before and they will do again. They'll attack Christians, atheists, anyone. This is something all Australians need to stand up on. It's an attack on our way of life, on our values and our security. Even if the ALP conference turns a blind eye and our Labor government doesn't have the stomach for it, we must stand up against Islamist extremism and terrorism. The alternative is unthinkable. Now, in the wake of the ALP conference, Anthony Albanese has been caught out yet again. Once more, it's hypocrisy that comes to the fore. Once more, with this Prime Minister, it's double standards and failure to take responsibility. Last week, Nine Media revealed the PM was the dinner guest of honour at a Sydney harbourside mansion hosted by 25-year-old Felix Lee, whose father, Philip, has gambled more than $2 billion. That's $2,000 million at Sydney's Star Casino, and is reportedly being pursued by the tax office for bringing undeclared funds into the country from China. Apparently, this dinner netted donations for Labor, perhaps as much as $1 million. But either the dinner was so good that Albanese can't remember it, or he wants to keep all the details secret, or he just doesn't want to talk about it. Whatever it is, have a look at this excruciating exchange.
I want to ask you, PM, about the reports in the Nine newspapers over recent days about a private fundraising dinner. Firstly, did you attend a dinner at the home of Felix Lee in Point Piper?
Oh, look, I attend lots of functions.
What about this one?
I attend lots of functions in lots of places, including last night right here.
What about this dinner at Point Piper?
I attend lots of functions in lots of places. Why do you want to answer that? Well, I do. You've just said that that occurred. You know, that's fine. I attend lots of dinners in lots of places, and I don't talk about private dinners. I've held a number this week here in Adelaide as well.
Lots of fundraising. This one, the concern is that his father is accused by the tax office of deceiving authorities about funneling huge sums of money from China to Australia. Is that a concern for you?
Well, I'm not aware of those issues.
Should you have been aware?
He wasn't there. He wasn't there. I attended a dinner last night with 750 people.
I'm not asking about that.
But they're the facts, David. I attend a lot of meetings, functions with lots of people, and talking about people's relatives, even removed from that.
Well, it's where the money's coming from, PM. Is this going to be looked into, whether there's a red flag here?
Well, we declare all of our donations in accordance with the rules. We're transparent about it. I do attend a lot of events, and you know, that is part of the process that occurs engaging with people.
So much for transparency, hey? I mean, it's just so disingenuous, this stuff, talking about, oh, it's relatives. You're asking about relatives of people at the dinner. He's talking about the father of the host. The host was 25 years old. Albo thought he was just going to have dinner at the 25-year-old's house, did he? Right? No idea who the father was. Done all right for a 25-year-old, hey? $40 million house on the harbour. Unbelievable. It's easier to get donations out of billionaires than answers out of Albo. But this is nothing new. This is not out of character. Remember in the lead up to the last election when Albanese and Labor hammered Peter Dutton for daring to attend a fundraising dinner in Sydney a few days before a cyclone hit Brisbane? Albanese was happy to attack Dutton, but didn't want to talk about his own fundraising efforts at the same time back then.
On Peter Dutton's movements, it's been well reported that he was at a political fundraiser in Sydney on March 4. Did you also attend a fundraising event on that day?
Look, that's a matter for him.
When China that's a matter for you, Prime Minister. It's a matter of whether you attended a fundraising event.
That's a matter for him. I'm not sure what day you're talking about.
Literally, the Prime Minister's excuse. I don't know what day you're talking about. I don't know what day it is. It's always the same old story with this Prime Minister.
Albo says it's not responsible, not responsible. She can't answer for the wrong things he gets up to. He thinks is not responsible, not responsible.
I wonder if that song was on the playlist at the Harbourside Mansion last week. So many questions, so few answers. Maybe the only way to get answers out of Albo is to host a lavish dinner and get some donations for the Labor Party. Let's go live to Melbourne now and catch up with former Labor federal MP Michael Danby. Michael, good to talk to you again.
Hi, Chris.
There's so much to catch up with you on. I really want to talk to you about the ALP conference, but first of all, with state politics has proceeded ahead of us, really. I want to get your take on Jacinta Allen. Will she resign? Should she resign? Or would there be a challenge, a hostile challenge, if you like, instead?
There has been a hostile challenge. She's written to the State Secretary saying to prepare the ballots, that she's going to force a ballot. Some people say that she's such a socialist left princess that she's going to stick no matter how unpopular she is. All of the MPs have come back from their electorates and she's absolutely toxic. This line about the Gatto tax on all Victorians has really stuck, Chris, and nonetheless, it would take 6 weeks. She'd have to have 13 MPs nominate her. But I suppose even Jeremy Corbyn was able to get half a dozen. So however unpopular she is, however badly the government is going, she's determined to stay.
What's about the process then in the Labor Party? How can Ben Carroll mount the challenge? How quickly can this happen? What is actually going on?
Well, he declares it tomorrow. There'd have to be a 6 weeks. The state election is barely 5 months away. Internal Labor Party ballot, and there'd be a ballot, another 50% of state members. So it's very much like the Rudd-Gillard situation that you'd remember, Chris, yep, where people said to save the furniture, we had to get rid of Gillard and put Rudd back. And he managed to keep a few more places. The socialists left are hoping their places in the outer southeast will be kept, and that would be a reason to express their conflict of disloyalties and vote against Jacinta Allen, even though she's in the same faction in the state caucus. But the problem is, if she demands it, it's got to go to this wider process that Rudd imposed on the federal caucus as well.
Yeah, so wouldn't there be a lot of action as we speak overnight, people trying to lean on her, factional heavyweights trying to lean on her to resign in the interests of the party?
But I'm told she's a regular porcupine. She's not moving. And she wrote to the State Secretary and put him on notice. And she just has to get those 13 people and she's back in the game. And she's hoping that Ben Carroll's nerve will fail.
Well, in a way, I think that's a good thing for Victorians because I think they should be given the opportunity to vote on her rather than to have a switcheroo put in place. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think whoever is the nominee, I think Victorian Labor are finished. The Gatto tax, the railway that leads from nowhere to nowhere, the machete fights in suburban shopping centres, the potholes. Some poor bloke in Geelong is in hospital and he can't get into emergency after having his bike fall into a pothole in Geelong. It's terrible down here and they deserve to be kicked out. But a worse thing could happen, Chris. If they lose sufficient seats, but the Greens are the difference, do you think Ben Carroll or Jacinta Allen wouldn't go into an alliance with the Green Party, even though they've promised not to?
Yeah, that is the worry, and that's what the worry about the fracturing of the right of centre vote with One Nation and the coalition. If you get the vote splitting everywhere, somehow you could have a Labor-Greens coalition hold on. That would be disastrous. It's amazing to hear you talk this way as a Labor man because you must be shattered that it's come to this for a state Labor government. But even more importantly, of course, you were a federal frontbencher. And to see what's happened at the ALP National Conference as a member of the Australian Jewish community, you've been a critic for a long while on their Middle East policy. You would have read Mike Kelly's article today that I highlighted earlier. What's your assessment of what's come out of that conference and what the implications are for this country, not just for the Jewish community, but for the whole country?
People who say the balance is right, that the vibe is good, that it was lovely to see a Palestinian and a Jewish fellow shake hands together. Well, all of that's very nice, but what that's saying is the actual policy of the government party doesn't matter. Albo promised, as he promised with capital gains tax, that he would not allow Hamas to be in a future Palestinian government, that they would have to disarm, and that the Palestinian Authority, to whom Australian taxpayers via Penny Wong's munificence gives millions of dollars, would no longer pay what salaries to Palestinian terrorists in jail. It's called a pay-for-slay scheme. All of those promises that he made when he voted last year at the UN on Palestine, abandoned. Now, they've got one good proposal to have with the Indonesians, a re-education scheme for poor Palestinian young people who've been fanaticised for decades by UNRWA. At the same time, we fund UNRWA, the Australian government, but a lot of European governments don't. The situation is very poor. I think words actually matter. And I agree with Shana Gutnick, the daughter of the poor man murdered in Bondi, that you can't call for all of these conditions on Israel and then say there are no conditions that apply to Hamas or the PA.
Look, I think a lot of these de-radicalisation programs are just window dressing. It's an excuse because they've never worked. We've had so many cases in the UK and Europe, and again really in Berlin on the weekend, where people supposedly who are being de-radicalised go ahead and conduct these operations anyway. But just to drill further into what you're saying now, I agree with you. When Anthony Albanese decided to recognise the non-existent state of Palestine, he said these things. The official Australian government policy then is that that no money should go from the Palestinian Authority to the martyrs, as they call them, or the families of the martyrs and other terrorists in jail, and that Hamas must disarm. Now, neither of those things have happened. Of course, they're still occurring. And I said there was nonsense at the time to impose those conditions anyway because you couldn't enforce them. But nonetheless, that is the Australian government policy. Yet the Australian Federal Labor Party conference couldn't even put into its own platform those policies that Labor's already signed up to. It couldn't even bring itself to say, disarm Hamas and stop paying terrorists with our taxpayers' money.
I thought your black humour in your editorial was very good, Chris, when you said they say we should be grateful for things not being as bad as they might have been. Well, the other excuse that Penny Wong offers to everyone is, oh, don't worry, the government will ignore all of this policy. Then why pass it? Why make such an effort to do that? Why ignore what you've said previously? With this kind of ahistorical government, events in the Middle East don't really count. There is a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, maybe a peace treaty. There's officially still a ceasefire in Gaza, and at the moment, there's no war between Israel and Iran because the Iranians are so scared of sending missiles into Israel. So things are a bit better, but that's the real world, the context. All of this verbiage, balance, the false narrative that Mike Kelly talked about is all designed just to assuage factions within the dominant socialist left faction in the Labor Party, so they won't get too angry about having anything that criticises the Islamist side of politics. We don't want more Gazans in Australia, Tony Burke. We don't want Dr. Jihad to come back here. And I think I speak for a lot of Labor people, a lot of Liberals, apart from the One Nation who are going up to 30% because you're doing this, Albo, Burke and Wong.
Yeah, brilliantly said, Michael. Just to wrap up, though, and we're really tight for time, so just quickly, if you could, the implications of this for Australia. But this is not just an esoteric debate about ALP policy or about global affairs. This has real impact on social cohesion in this country. How would you describe that?
Well, people are terrified of the government giving more authority to Hamas by not criticising them. That's what Shana Gutnick understood on the front page of The Australian today when she's quoted as saying that. No conditions on Hamas from the Albo government, even though he promised last year. Another broken promise.
Thanks for joining us, Michael. I really appreciate you. Michael
Thanks.
Danby there, the former federal Labor MP, former federal frontbencher. You often see him on Andrew Bolt's program. Really good to hear from him today. There's a Labor man through and through with a frank assessment of the Jacinta Allen government in Victoria, but also about what Labor is doing when it comes to Middle East policy and how it hurts our social cohesion and national security in this country. It's not right-wing nut jobs creating alarm about this. Labor people who know what's going on know this is terrible. We've got to do something about it in this country. We've already paid an intolerable price at Bondi, yet there's no sign of anybody getting it right in the future or anything improving. Let's move on to other issues now. And I'm joined on the desk by the Deputy Opposition Whip in the Senate, Senator Jessica Collins. Thanks for joining us, Jessica.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Good to have you back here. I want to get your thoughts, going back to the nitty-gritty of political partisanship, your thoughts on Anthony Albanese seeming to not even remember who was at his dinner and why he was there last week.
Well, Chris, the last time I was on your show, I think we talked about that terrible podcast that he was on and the failure to actually research who he was being interviewed by and what that kind of interview would look like. Now, here we are again. He's gone to a fundraiser hosted by a man whose parents have rorted the ATO and rorted taxpayers and funneled money from China into Australia. And he hasn't either bothered to check that out or he didn't care. Now, both of those results are completely outrageous, and I think he has to answer questions and answer them properly. I
think one of the big problems is he doesn't. I mean, if he had a robust defence of what he's doing, fine. But it's just this idea. I don't really know. There's no sense of being accountable whatsoever.
No sense of being accountable. I think he said those exact words that he didn't know about it. Now he should. Now you go to fundraisers. Often there are a lot of people there. You can't simply vet everybody. But he is the Prime Minister.
But this is not a big fundraiser. This is dinner. This is a bunch of people around a table. He knows whose house it is.
He knows whose house it is, and he was raising a lot of money, and that means a lot. So you need to know about the people that are putting so much. And it's not just the money that they hand over. It's the house, it's the staff, that are the catering staff, all the food and the wine and the entertainment. They go out on all stops, and he should know about the people.
Well, I've got to point out, though, at this very moment, of course, the Liberal Party in New South Wales is going through an ICAC inquiry looking at how, allegedly, Liberal politicians broke the rules, accepting donations from property developers, which is illegal. So, obviously, on your side of politics, you've got some real issues with accountability here at the moment.
Well, look, Chris, ICAC is one thing, and I won't be commenting on that. Obviously, it's going through the process at the moment. But I think both major parties have to take a good, hard look at themselves. And, you know, we need to be electable at the next election. And with that comes authenticity. And with that comes, you know, looking back on ourselves and realising what we got wrong and what we can do a whole lot better.
I really think the easy way to fix this is that political parties, when they get a donation, it's not hard to do in the digital age, within 24 hours of that money going into their bank account, it should be up on a public register. Just instant declaration of wherever donations come from would fix the problem overnight. That enables accountability. We shall see. I've got to get you, before you go, though, on One Nation and coalitions. Here's what your Senate colleague Andrew Bragg had to say.
We will definitely work out whoever would be interested in being in a coalition with us if that's what the numbers were. Of course, we're not crazy. If the numbers were the numbers and we had to be in coalition with others, then of course we would be pragmatic.
This is the reality, isn't it? Whether it's the Victorian election, the looming New South Wales election or a federal election, if after the election a coalition could form government by bringing in One Nation, you'd do that, surely.
Well, I think, you know, first of all, we are working in hypotheticals and we're working way above my pay grade when we start talking about coalition, Chris. But, you know, if we look at the process over the past few years of political fragmentation that we've had, a few years ago we could have started talking about, or, you know, the left could have started talking about us forming a coalition with the Teals. Now, of course, we saw how that played out. They are way too left. They vote 80% of the time with the Greens. Yeah. We have never seen a large One Nation party tested in government and how that all plays out. So, again, we're working in hypotheticals here. I
think you'd have a lot more in common with One Nation than the Teals. The Teals are green lefties for sure. Thanks for joining us, Senator. I appreciate it. Just out of time now. Senator Jess Collins there. We've got to get to a break. On the other side, we're going to talk about how Labor's higher taxes and the highest interest rates we're getting to from the inflation problem are really seeing real estate sales plummet. We'll get an expert view in just a moment. Let's get back to Labor's budget fallout, the real estate changes, the tax hikes, and auction clearance rates have fallen through the floor. With Victoria, the only state recording a rate over 50% last weekend. In Queensland, there was only 29% clearance, 43% in New South Wales, South Australia just below 50%, and WA on 19%. Auctioneer and real estate expert Tom Panos has hit out on social media saying it's the worst conditions he's seen in 3 decades. Have a look.
Today was the worst. 0 out of 6. But that's not the metric that's going to concern you. I'll tell you what the metric that's going to concern you. I didn't have a single person register to bid. Do you understand? Not one registration.
Tom joins me now live in the studio. Tom, you could tell your sense of surprise and exasperation about that. Has that ever happened to you before, where you had a real estate auction and no one has registered?
So not only for one property, we're talking about there were 6 auctions. No one registered on any of the 6 auctions.
Good Lord.
Let's make that clear. Not one auction, all 6. That's why I said it's my worst day. I mean, selling 0, Chris, out of 6 is bad enough. But to actually have no one to actually come along and say, you know what, this market's dropped. Maybe I'll get myself a bargain. Not even anyone had the appetite to do that.
That's extraordinary. No, I took it from the video. It might have been no registrations at one of the auctions.
No, all 6.
None, all 6. What happens as an auctioneer? Do you still get paid for turning up?
Chris, you do. you do. But look, let's be very clear. I'm happier when they sell because the vendor's happier, the agent's happier. I don't want to sort of sail off into the sunsets thinking that, you know, I've picked up my fee and they're unhappy.
So tell us about what's going on here, because there are a number of factors. There's the tax changes, there's the general economic cycle. Are prices plummeting? It's got to be a buyer's market, doesn't it?
OK, so Chris, we've got to make it very clear. There's not one real estate market. There is multiple markets, and they're both based on geography and price. So when you look at geography, you can turn around and say Sydney, Melbourne, they are in a bad state. Brisbane is now heading that way as well. Perth, your viewers saw on the screen, those numbers look atrocious. And don't forget, the numbers you showed doesn't include the properties. That's called the preliminary clearance rate. As the next few days go over, those numbers are going to be revised down, not up. So,
is that right? I thought they might go up as people come in after a failed auction. Do they go down because people get cold feet?
No, what it is real estate agents don't always do the reporting on a Saturday. Right. And the ones that don't report normally are the ones that haven't sold. But by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the dust has settled, the data's in there, and the truth comes out. They get revised by around 5% is roughly they get revised. But Chris, to answer your question, you've got multiple markets geography, but you've also got multiple markets by price point. Price point, high, medium, low. High is the one that's copped it the most. So in some markets, we're seeing 15 to 20% drops. Medium price points, we're seeing around 10% drops. And the lower price points, which is a bit ironic because you would have thought to yourself this whole budget strategy was about helping first home buyers. That 5% deposit scheme means that there's plenty of people still there. So there really hasn't been much of an opportunity for the newer first home buyers to come in. But overall, it doesn't look good, Chris. We're talking about, to me, the biggest issue, it's not even the prices, it's the volume.
Yeah.
It's gridlocked. Like, sellers are saying, why go onto the market? We're not going to get our price. Buyers are saying, let's not buy. Negative equity, prices it, so
wait and see what happens.
Good.
You touched on it there, but I just want to finish on this point because if I'm Jim Chalmers, God help me, I would pretend I'm some sort of a genius. I'm taking all the investors out of the market.
You've done a PhD on
Paul Keating,
so you are a genius.
And so this is all the investors coming out of the market and the top end, but at the lower end, this is making housing cheaper for first home buyers, and they'll be coming into the market. Is that happening or not?
No, it's not happening. It's not happening because, quite frankly, a lot of these first-home buyers are concerned about negative equity. They're sort of seeing it and they're hearing that prices are going to keep dropping down. You're not going to get a young person that's going to go borrow $950,000 with a 5% deposit scheme buy $1 million property to find out it's then worth $850. They're not doing it. And quite frankly, I said to you off air, this whole strategy, which was hoping to get people to move away from existing properties to new properties, they've rejected that. They're not buying the new properties, investors.
Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it. That's a view right from the coalface there. Worrying situation in the real estate market. We've got to get to a break. On the other side, we'll check in on the Commonwealth Games and some of the drama that's unfolding in Glasgow. Sophie Ellsworth is there for us. As we were discussing earlier, the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen is digging in, trying to hang on to her premiership. Her Deputy Premier Ben Carroll has announced that he's happy to challenge for the top job. State political reporter Georgie Dickinson has been following all these developments all day for us here at News24. Georgie, it's been an unfolding disaster for Labor. What's happening as we speak?
Yeah, good evening to you, Chris. It certainly has been an interesting day, no doubt. At the moment, talks are happening behind the scenes with Jacinta Allen and her Labor colleagues ahead of Parliament returning tomorrow morning, where the party room will meet. But it started the day where a number of ministers went to the Premier asking her to resign, to step aside, to pave the way for the Deputy Premier, Ben Carroll, to take on the leadership just over 4 months out from the state election. Now, in turn, the Premier refused, and she told those ministers to instead resign, which obviously they have not done, but it's certainly been a messy situation here. But we must remember it was 6 weeks ago to the day that Ben Carroll had this to say on taking on the leadership.
I have said I've got the job I want.
You don't want to be Premier?
I have said I got the job I want.
You don't want to be Premier?
I have always aspired to be the Education Minister.
Have you aspired to be the Premier?
We have a Premier and she's working harder than anyone every day. I want to serve Jacinta Allen, and I want to make sure. No, look.
That's why people
I've got a young daughter at home, and I couldn't be more proud to make sure she grows up knowing that I supported Jacinta Allen to be a world-class Premier and get re-elected in her own right. That's enough for me.
Are you going to ask her to step aside?
No.
Can you look her in the eye and say that?
I can look you in the eye and say that, Premier.
That is a beautiful piece of political theatre, Georgie. But I suppose that's the way you go. You've got to pledge your loyalty publicly until it disappears. But this is really disastrous. You've got the state election looming in November, all right? Already it's a shambles. If Jacinta Allen doesn't hand over and it goes to a contest, it'll be weeks of turmoil for Labor, won't it?
Certainly going to be, is in terms of the leadership spill, she obviously has, the government has enough numbers to have a successful leadership spill, but it's after this fact, and it's what the Premier has written to the State Secretary of Labor, saying that if there is a leadership contest, she will contest that position. And essentially what that means is it could drag out for up to 2 months, and we're only 4 months out from the state election, half that time caught up with internal turmoil, when really Labor should be focusing on fixing the alleged corruption on the big build sites here in Victoria and helping Victorians at a dire time really here in Victoria, when the cost of living is going through the roof and crime is running rampant on our streets.
Spot on, Georgie, spot on. Thanks for joining us. Georgie Dickinson's been all over it all day, a long day for her. I think she'll be staying on board and crossing into later programs tonight as well. What a shambles in Victoria. On the bright side, while all those Labor ministers and the Premier are fighting amongst themselves, hopefully they can't find time to inflict any more harm on the state of Victoria. We shall see. They'll give it their best shot, no doubt. Let's go to the other side of the world now, though, and catch up with Sophie Ellsworth at the Commonwealth Games in Scotland. We're going to do that in a moment. Actually, first up, I just want to give you a bit of background here of what's been going on in Glasgow, where police made 15 arrests on Saturday after anti-immigration protesters took to the streets. Have a look.
Stand down home! Stand down home! Stand down home!
Yeah, aren't they called the friendly games, the Commonwealth Games? Let's catch up with Sophie Ellsworth, News24 contributor and News Corp, of course, Europe correspondent. Sophie, give us a sense of how those demonstrations, those protests have impacted on Glasgow.
Yeah, great to be with you, Chris. Look, they were shocking scenes here in Glasgow on the weekend. We saw those protesters running through Glasgow Green, a beautiful part of the city. There were police with batons, police on horseback, a lot of men dressed in black outfits with balaclavas. Really, they were protesting against migration here in the UK, Chris, yelling out chants such as "Stop the Boats." But look, Chris, some of that vision really reminded me of the vision that we saw during COVID lockdowns in Victoria. We've got the games here in Scotland, as we know. They were meant to be in Victoria. Scotland's on the world stage at the moment, and this was an awfully bad look for Glasgow to have these protests going on at the same time as the games, Chris.
And there were special security arrangements. Security was beefed up for the athletes, I believe.
Yes, so the Commonwealth Games Australia was on high alert following these protests to ensure that athletes, officials and their families were kept safe. It really seemed to be something that occurred on the Saturday and thankfully hasn't continued on throughout the following days, Chris, but not good at all.
Now, tell me about this other thing. This does my head in, right? Gina Rinehart, wealthiest woman in the country, wealthiest person in the country, but loves to give back through sport. No doubt, as we know, all sorts of other charitable endeavours as well, but she's really focused on sport. She rewards athletes individually, helps a lot of them get to the games and gives them cash bonuses if they deliver medals. But our sporting authorities, in their wisdom, have told athletes not to thank her if they win a medal. I mean, it's what they've told people effectively, don't be grateful to a person who is helping you.
Well, Chris, this all comes down to arrangements the players or the athletes rather have with Commonwealth Games Australia and their contracts, and they're very strict contracts where they cannot thank unofficial sponsors or benefactors. Gina Rinehart, as generous as she is not an official sponsor of the Commonwealth Games swimmers. So they have been told, Chris, not to mention her when they're thanking their supporters and so forth when they do well in their events. But Chris, I think this has made it worse because now it has become more of a story, and we know that Senator Hanson weighed in and she told me she thought this was appalling. So not great at all for all involved here.
Look, it's just pathetic. There should be no politics, nothing involved. If she's helping people out and they feel they want to thank her publicly, they should be allowed to. It's called common decency. And these authorities jump in with their talk of contract. It's very un-Australian, and it's not fair on our athletes, let alone Gina Rinehart. But in the good news, of course, we've been smoking it as ever in Nepal in the Commonwealth Games. No one can keep up. I loved it in the 50 metres where Cam McAvoy, of course, the world record holder, won. But we got 1, 2 and 3. Let's have a listen to Cameron McAvoy. Just fantastic stuff there. Is it 1, 2 and 3, Sophie? We've actually got a young bloke in Australia at the moment, Ollie Mockler, who's swimming faster at 18 years of age, or 19 years now, than Cam McAvoy was then. So we're going to be pretty good in that event for a long while to come, I think.
Well, we are indeed, Chris. Look, we're cleaning up in the pool as we always do here at the Commonwealth Games. The atmosphere down at the swimming pool has been absolutely electric. Cam McAvoy is a force of nature. He's 32 and he said he's got a long way to go yet, but making incredible times here, Chris. Great for Australia. And look, some of the British reporters were saying to me yesterday, what is Australia's secret? Why are you guys so damn good at swimming? So it's something that we can boast about, probably like the cricket, Chris.
Yeah, I reckon pop down here, check out the weather and the coastline. You'll get a bit of a clue. Thanks, Sophie.
Exactly.
Enjoy it. Sophie Ellsworth live from Glasgow. Great stuff. We're going to get to a break. Afterwards, on the other side, we're going to catch up with Gemma Tognini and Caroline Giroux. So we'll delve into the Prime Minister's dinners again, find out a bit more about that. Let's bring in Gemma Tognini and Caroline De Russo.
Hello, my friends.
Good to see you.
Great to be here.
I've got to show you both something about, this is Elon Musk hitting back against this term of hard right. It's thrown at anybody who speaks any sense these days, and I reckon he kind of got it right. Have a look at Elon Musk.
Well, you support not just the populist right, but the far right. In fact, very fringe parties in some countries.
No, I support the normal people.
Okay.
What you call the far right, falsely.
You think is the normal person. Okay.
Yes. And tell me, which of these sound terrible? That we should have secure borders, that we should have safe cities, that we should have sensible spending. Which of those three are far right
Those
fringe?
No,
and I would like to just admonish you and the media for the absurd characterization of the far right. It is false and misleading and nonsense. Please keep this part in.
And we did get to see it. He is just so spot on there, isn't he?
He absolutely spot on. I mean, I think you get characterised as being something just for saying exactly what he said. And no more powerful, potent example of that is around gender and sexual, you know, the reality of there being two genders, all of that sort of stuff. We've seen that horrible incident in Berlin Pride over the weekend, and to suggest that radical Islam is a problem is apparently far right. Our own ASIO reporters confirmed that year after year after year. He's simply saying what everybody else knows. And if you want to bring it back into a local context, let's look at the rise of One Nation. Most people who I know, and I know, believe it or not, dozens who are planning to vote One Nation, have very sensible views like controlled immigration, not anti-immigration, controlled immigration. Those sorts of things.
Well, exactly. I mean, they used to call John Howard far right.
Of course they did.
And they used to say the same about Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. It's absurd. Caro, and to me, a country you know well, Italy, right? This is a classic, right? They've always tried to demonise Giorgia Meloni as far right. What? Because she wants to run efficient government and control Italy's borders. It's absurd.
Well, that would be a change for the Italians. So she should be a change maker, really, more than just being far right. But what it ultimately says, Chris, and it's a word that is used to describe a particular group of people. But ultimately, what you need to look at, Chris, is who is saying it and where are they standing. And maybe when people who ascribe to those views of controlled immigration and whatever are not far right. Maybe they're just a very long way from the far left, Chris.
Exactly.
And that there is something that I think the media really struggle with, because, yes, there is a gap between those two kind of general cohorts of views. But maybe the far right isn't as far as what the far left think the far right actually is. So it all comes down to perspective as far as I'm concerned,
The gap is just as big as they think it is. It's just, they're starting somewhere else. Hey, just quickly, I want to get both your thoughts on this Albo thing. Can you imagine the insult? You imagine you had Albo over for dinner, and when he's asked about it, he basically denies all knowledge. Instead of saying, oh, no, Gemma's place was great, we had a good crowd there, and this is what we talked about. Oh, what, Gemma Tognini? I don't know who she is.
No, well, if he was at my house for dinner, you'd know it was a cry for help, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that this is just so on brand for this person. He is allergic to accountability. Everything he does that is open for question is then followed by plausible deniability. And I use this example all the time. The voice loss was not his loss.
No.
The issue of women's spaces and women's identity in this country, it's a culture war. He does not have an accountable bone in his body, and I remain firmly of the view, because I'm old enough to remember how this stuff eventually bites somebody on the bottom, that there will be something he cannot wriggle out of. And in this case, let me give you an example. I get, as you no doubt do, I get asked to do a lot of things for a lot of people. I get asked to speak at events, go to functions. Do you know what I ask? Who's there? Who's going to be in the room? In fact, I got invited to do something last week, and I said, I will not say yes until I understand who I'm sharing the stage with. I don't believe this man. He lies.
15 seconds on this, Caro.
We do fundraising all the time, Chris. We just do in organisations, and guess what? I've chaired a lot of these sorts of dinners, and no one's coming to see me.
Thanks for joining us, Caroline De Russo and Gemma Tognini. That's all the time we've got for you tonight. Just a plug for tomorrow night. Don't forget Paul Murray's special, Ask Me Anything with Pauline Hanson. Please explain. She's going to be there with Paul and a live audience asking her questions directly, 9 o'clock tomorrow night here on News 24. Here's Peter Credlin.